When I asked about the opening date of my daughter's restaurant, my son-in-law just smiled. We celebrated yesterday, only with close friends and family. A week later, he was already shouting, "The mortgage is overdue. Did you pay the bills?" He didn't know yet that on the day he crossed me off his list of friends, I crossed off his dreams too. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. The phone buzzed against the kitchen counter. I stared at it, watching Goldie's name flash on the screen for the third time that morning. My daughter never called 3 times in a row unless she needed money. "Dad, finally!" Her voice crackled through the speaker, that edge I'd learned to recognize over the past 8 months. "Chester and I need to talk to you about the mortgage payment. Can you come by the house today?" I glanced around my modest apartment in La Jolla at the second-hand furniture and the coffee maker I'd owned for 15 years. The view of the ocean through my window was the only luxury I'd allowed myself since retirement. Everything else had gone to her. "Sure, sweetheart. What time works?" 2 o'clock. Don't be late." She hung up before I could respond. No goodbye. No, "Love you, Dad." Just the dial tone humming in my ear like a warning I should have heeded months ago. I arrived at the house on Claremont Drive at 1:55 p.m., 5 minutes early like I'd taught Goldie when she was young. The Spanish-style home gleamed in the afternoon sun, its terracotta roof tiles perfect, the lawn manicured to country club standards. $685,000 of real estate, and I'd put down $165,000 to make it happen. Chester opened the door before I could knock. My son-in-law stood there in designer jeans and a polo shirt that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. He didn't smile. "Lem, come in." Not Dad or even Mr. Arnold. Just my first name, flat and impersonal. I followed him through the marble-floored entryway, past the custom kitchen with Wolf appliances, into the living room where Goldie sat on their leather sectional. The furniture alone had cost $12,000. I knew because I'd seen the receipt when I helped them move in. "Hi, Dad." Goldie's smile was tight, practiced. She looked like her mother had at 35, blonde hair, sharp features, the kind of beauty that turned heads at restaurants. But her mother had been warm. This version of my daughter felt like talking to a stranger wearing a familiar face. "We wanted to discuss the restaurant opening," Chester said, settling into the armchair across from me. "It's coming up fast, and there are some last-minute expenses we didn't anticipate." I nodded slowly. The restaurant. Golden Harvest on University Avenue in North Park. My daughter's dream since she was 16, sketching restaurant layouts in her notebooks instead of doing homework. I'd given her $120,000 for that dream, my retirement fund, trimmed down to make her happy. "How much?" I asked. Chester exchanged a glance with Goldie. 15,000. The commercial-grade refrigeration unit needs replacing before the health inspection, and I already gave you everything I budgeted for the restaurant," I said. "The agreement was $120 for startup costs, and you'd handle operational expenses from your savings." "Dad?" Goldie leaned forward, her voice taking on that sweet tone that used to work when she was 12. "We've been over budget because we want to make sure this place is perfect. You want us to succeed, don't you?" I remembered the last time I'd sat in this room, 8 months ago, signing the mortgage papers. Chester had gripped my shoulder, called me the best father-in-law a guy could ask for, promised they'd pay me back within 5 years. Goldie had actually cried, thanking me for believing in her. Now they looked at me like I was an ATM that had stopped dispensing cash. "I want you to succeed within your means," I said carefully, "but I'm on a fixed income now. I can't keep—" "You're the co-owner on the mortgage," Chester interrupted. 60%. You have a vested interest in our success. If the restaurant fails, your investment fails too." There it was, the shift from gratitude to entitlement, wrapped in financial logic. I'd spent 30 years as a financial consultant, helping wealthy clients manage their portfolios, structuring deals worth millions. Did they really think I didn't understand what he was doing? "I'll think about it," I said, standing up. "When's the grand opening? I want to make sure I'm there." The room went quiet. Chester's jaw tightened. Goldie studied her manicured nails like they held the secrets of the universe. "About that," Goldie said finally. "We're keeping it intimate, just close friends and some food critics. You understand, right? Too many people gets overwhelming, and we want to make the right impression." Something cold settled in my chest. "When is it?" "Next Friday," Chester said. 7 p.m. But like Goldie said, we're keeping the guest list tight. Industry people mostly. You know how it is. I didn't know how it was. I didn't know how you excluded the man who'd made your dream possible, who'd co-signed your mortgage, who'd eaten ramen for 3 months to save money for your down payment. I didn't know how you looked that man in the eye and called him not close enough. But I smiled, nodded. Of course. Good luck with it. I drove home in my 2015 Honda Civic, the one I'd kept running long past when I could have afforded something newer. Traffic on the 5 was heavy, giving me plenty of time to think, to remember. Goldie at 7, crying because she'd failed a math test, and I'd stayed up until midnight helping her study for the retake. Goldie at 16, when her mother died, and she'd sobbed in my arms for hours while I held her together. Goldie at 25, broke and scared after her first business attempt failed, and I'd told her everyone deserves a second chance. I'd given her the second chance, the third, the fourth. Now I wasn't close enough to attend her restaurant opening. Back in my apartment, I made coffee in my ancient Mr. Coffee machine and stood at the window, watching the sun set over the Pacific. The waves rolled in, constant and indifferent, the same way they had for millions of years. My phone buzzed, a text from Goldie. Thanks for understanding about the opening. We'll take you to dinner there once things settle down. Love you. 3 words at the end of a message about exclusion, like a consolation prize, like I should be grateful for the scraps. I thought about my friend Elmer, the attorney who'd helped me structure the mortgage agreement. He'd warned me, Lem, make sure you protect yourself. Family and money don't always mix well. I'd laughed it off, told him Goldie would never take advantage. I pulled out the mortgage documents from my filing cabinet and spread them across my small dining table. 60% ownership, co-signer status, and a clause I'd insisted on over Chester's objections. Either party may suspend financial obligations pending review if circumstances materially change. The circumstances had changed, all right. I picked up my phone and called Elmer. He answered on the second ring. Lem, everything okay? I need you to review some documents, I said, and I need to know exactly what my options are if I decide to stop paying someone else's mortgage. There was a pause. Then, what happened? Nothing yet, I said, watching the last slice of sun disappear into the ocean. But I think it's time I reminded some people that being family doesn't mean being a doormat. I hung up and poured myself another cup of coffee. In the reflection of the dark window, I could see myself smiling. Not the sad smile of a hurt father, but something sharper. Something they wouldn't expect from a quiet 63-year-old retiree. Something they'd earned. 3 days passed before I heard from them again. 3 days of deliberate silence on my part, while I sat in Elmer's office on Broadway in downtown San Diego, reviewing every page of the mortgage agreement with the precision I'd once used for million-dollar client portfolios. You're completely within your rights, Elmer said, sliding his reading glasses down his nose to look at me properly. He was 67, with silver hair and the kind of steady demeanor that came from 40 years of contract law. This clause here, material change in circumstances, that's your escape hatch. You can suspend payments and demand a full financial audit. I traced my finger along the paragraph. Chester had barely read this section when we'd signed. He'd been too busy calculating how much house he could afford with my money backing him. What happens if I just stop paying? The bank sends notices, 15 days for the first warning, 30 for the second. After 60 days of non-payment, they can initiate foreclosure proceedings. But since you own 60%, they'd need your approval to proceed. Elmer leaned back in his leather chair. You'd essentially have them cornered. They can't sell without you, can't refinance without you, can't do anything without you. The thought satisfied something cold in my chest. And the restaurant loan? That's trickier. It's in their names, but you're listed as a silent partner due to your investment. If they default, it hits their credit, not yours. But you could file a claim to recover your funds if the business fails. I drove home along the coast, windows down, breathing in the salt air. My phone rang somewhere around Del Mar, Goldie's number again. Dad, hey! Her voice was artificially bright. So, the opening is tomorrow night, and I wanted to give you the address in case you wanted to drive by and see the place from the outside. You know, see what your investment built. See it from the outside, like a tourist, like someone who didn't matter enough to walk through the doors. That's thoughtful, I said, keeping my voice neutral. How are the preparations going? Crazy busy. Chester's been working 18-hour days. The kitchen equipment arrived yesterday. Dad, you should see the Viking range we got. 6 burners, double oven, it's a beast. I remembered the financing paperwork for that range. $18,000 for a restaurant that hadn't served a single paying customer yet. Sounds impressive. Listen, Goldie, I need to ask you something. Sure, what's up? When you and Chester asked me to co-sign the mortgage, you said I'd be part of the family decisions, that we'd be partners in this journey. I paused at a red light, watching a family cross the street with their kids. Do partners usually get excluded from grand openings? Silence stretched between us like a wire pulled too tight. Dad, it's not like that. It's just, Chester has a vision for the brand and he thinks, Chester thinks what? He thinks we need to project a certain image, young, dynamic, innovative. Having parents there might make us seem less independent. The light turned green. I didn't move until someone honked behind me. I see, I said quietly. So I'm good enough to be your bank, but not good enough to be seen with. That's not fair, her voice cracked. You're twisting this into something it's not. We're grateful for everything you've done, but this is our business, our dream. We need space to make it our own. Our dream. I'd heard her talk about this dream since she was a teenager. I'd encouraged it, nurtured it, paid for culinary courses at Le Cordon Bleu when Chester said community college wasn't prestigious enough. $42,000 for those courses. I'd kept a spreadsheet, not because I was counting, but because old habits from my consulting days died hard. The down payment, $165,000. Restaurant startup, $120,000. Culinary school, $42,000. The new refrigeration unit they had mentioned, $15,000. Monthly mortgage payments for 8 months, $25,600. $367,600 for space to make it their own. You're right, I said. I apologize. I hope the opening goes beautifully. I ended the call before she could respond. My hands were steady on the wheel, steadier than they'd been in days. Clarity felt like cold water after a long sleep. That night, I couldn't help myself. I drove past Golden Harvest around 8 p.m. when the opening was in full swing. The restaurant glowed from within, floor-to-ceiling windows showing a crowd of well-dressed people holding wine glasses, laughing. A sandwich board outside announced "Grand Opening by Invitation Only." I parked across the street and watched. Goldie moved through the crowd in a black cocktail dress, radiant, playing hostess like she'd been born to it. Chester stood by the bar, gesturing animatedly to a group of men in expensive suits, probably the investors he'd mentioned wanting to attract. They looked happy. Successful, like people who'd made it on their own. Then I saw Inez Delgado walk in, the realtor who'd sold them the house. She hugged Goldie, handed Chester a bottle of champagne. She'd called me 2 days ago, friendly as always, assuming I'd be at the opening. Your daughter must be so excited. You must be so proud. I'd told her I was, hadn't mentioned I wasn't invited. A young couple emerged from the restaurant, and the man held the door for a brief moment. Music spilled out, along with the scent of expensive food. Through that open door, I heard Chester's voice, loud with wine and confidence. Completely self-made, you know? Started from nothing and built this with my wife's talent and my business sense. I drove away before I could hear the rest. Back home, I made myself a sandwich and sat at my small table with the mortgage documents. The April payment was due in 6 days, $3,200, same as every month. I'd set up automatic payment through my bank when we'd first signed. I picked up my phone and called the bank's automated system, navigated through the menus, canceled the automatic payment. The confirmation number echoed in my quiet apartment, 77382 Alpha Delta. It felt like standing on the edge of something vast and irreversible. My daughter would panic when that payment didn't go through. Chester would call, angry and accusatory. There would be consequences, fallout, probably tears and shouting. But I'd spent 3 years watching my retirement savings drain into their pockets while they treated me like a necessary inconvenience. 3 years of, "Dad, can you help with?" and "Dad, we wouldn't ask if it wasn't important." 3 years of being the safety net they never acknowledged until they needed it again. I thought about my late wife Sarah, who'd made me promise before she died to always take care of our little girl. I'd honored that promise every day for 17 years since her death. But Sarah had also taught Goldie about gratitude, about respect, about understanding that love wasn't a transaction. Somewhere along the way, those lessons had gotten buried under ambition and entitlement. I pulled out my old laptop and opened a new document, started typing a list. Every expense, every loan, every instance of financial support I'd provided since Goldie's wedding 5 years ago. The numbers climbed higher than I'd realized. Beyond the major investments, there were the small favors. $2,000 here for a car repair, $500 there for a dental emergency, $800 for the deposit on their first apartment. When I finished, the total sat on the screen like an accusation. $412,300. Nearly $500,000 to people who couldn't spare me a chair at their celebration. My phone buzzed. A text from Goldie, sent to a group chat that included Chester. Amazing night. 37 people showed up, and the food critic from San Diego magazine loved the braised short ribs. This is really happening. No mention of me. No, wish you could have been here, Dad. Just excitement about their triumph. I set the phone face down and stared out at the dark ocean. Tomorrow, the bank would process my cancellation. In 15 days, Chester and Goldie would get their first notice. They'd call, demanding to know what happened, and I'd tell them exactly what they'd told me, that I needed space to make my life my own. The first week of April passed with unusual peace. I spent my mornings walking along La Jolla shores, watching surfers catch waves in the cool dawn light. Afternoons, I read books I'd been meaning to get to for years. Evenings, I cook simple meals and watch the sunset paint the sky, orange and purple. My phone stayed mostly silent. Goldie sent occasional texts about the restaurant, good reviews, busy weekend, a minor plumbing issue they had handled, but nothing that required my financial intervention. Chester didn't contact me at all, which suited me fine. On day 14, I received an email from Pacific Coast Bank. Subject line, missed payment notice, account Merav 7829653. I opened it with my morning coffee, reading the formal language about my April payment being 15 days overdue, the $150 late fee now assessed to the account, and the importance of bringing the account current within the next 15 days to avoid further penalties. I forwarded it to Elmer with a simple message. It begins. His response came within minutes. Remember, you're completely protected legally. Document everything. And Lem, don't answer their first call. Let them panic a little. Sound advice. I silenced my phone and went for a longer walk than usual, all the way to the La Jolla Cove, where tourists clustered around the sea lions basking on the rocks. A young couple asked me to take their photo. They smiled at each other with such genuine affection that I almost felt bad for them. They had no idea how easily love could curdle into transaction. My phone showed 6 missed calls when I checked it that evening. All from Chester, no voicemails, just the relentless attempts to reach me. I could picture him in that pristine kitchen on Claremont Drive, pacing across the marble floors, jaw clenched with frustration. I made myself dinner, grilled chicken and vegetables, and ate slowly, savoring each bite. Around 8 p.m., a text arrived from Goldie. Dad, Chester says you haven't returned his calls. Is everything okay? Call us when you get a chance. I waited until morning to respond. Everything's fine, been busy, what's up? The reply came in seconds. Can you call? Important. Instead, I texted back, at the doctor's office, we'll call later. I wasn't at the doctor's office. I was sitting on my balcony watching pelicans dive for fish, drinking excellent coffee from a local roaster on Girard Avenue. But they'd kept me in the dark about their restaurant opening. Fair was fair. 3 more days passed. The calls escalated. Chester left his first voicemail, his voice tight with forced calm. Lem, we need to discuss the mortgage payment. The bank sent a notice. I'm sure it's just an oversight, but we should sort this out ASAP. Give me a call back. An oversight. As if I'd simply forgotten to pay $3,000. As if 30 years of managing other people's millions had left me incapable of tracking my own finances. I called Elmer instead. How much trouble are they in right now? Legally, none yet. Financially? He paused, and I heard papers shuffling. That late fee is just the start. If this goes to 30 days overdue, it jumps to $300. 60 days, and the bank can report it to credit agencies. That would tank their score, make refinancing impossible, and probably trigger reviews on any other credit they have. Like business loans for restaurants? Exactly like that. I thanked him and hung up. Through my apartment window, I could see a family on the beach below, building a sandcastle. The father lifted his young daughter onto his shoulders, and she squealed with delight. I remember doing that with Goldie at that age, her small hands gripping my hair as she pointed at seagulls and shouted their names with absolute certainty. When had she stopped seeing me as someone who carried her on his shoulders and started seeing me as something to climb over? Day 20 arrived. I was at the grocery store, the Vaughn's on La Jolla Village Drive, when Chester finally caught me. My phone rang while I was comparing prices on coffee brands. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. "Where the hell have you been?" No greeting, no pretense of civility. "I've been calling for a week." I moved my cart aside to let another shopper pass. "I've been around. What's the problem?" "What's the problem? The mortgage payment, Lem. You didn't pay it. The bank is threatening penalties and our credit is at risk." "What happened?" "Oh, that." I picked up a bag of coffee, the cheap grocery store brand, not the expensive stuff I used to buy. "I've been reassessing my financial obligations. You know, making sure everything aligns with my current priorities." Silence crackled across the line. When Chester spoke again, his voice had dropped to something dangerous. "What are you talking about? You're on the mortgage. You have to pay." "Actually, I don't. Elmer, you remember my attorney friend? He reviewed the contract. Turns out I have the right to suspend payments if circumstances materially change." "What circumstances?" I reached the checkout lane, started unloading my modest purchases. "Well, for instance, if I discover I'm not considered a close enough person to be included in family celebrations. That seems pretty material to me." The explosion I'd been waiting for finally came. "Are you serious right now? You're going to tank our mortgage because you're pissy about the restaurant opening? That's childish, Lem. I prefer to call it setting boundaries," I said calmly. The cashier, a young woman with purple highlights, raised her eyebrows but said nothing. "You and Goldie wanted space to make the business your own. I'm giving you space to handle the house your own way too." "You can't do this." "I already did. The payment's been canceled for April and May. June too, probably, unless something changes." "Unless you're blackmailing us? What do you want? An apology?" I paid for my groceries with cash, accepted my receipt. "I don't want anything, Chester. I'm just tired of being treated like a wallet with legs. You figure out what comes next." I hung up before he could respond. My hands shook slightly as I loaded bags into my car, not from fear, but from the sheer adrenaline of finally saying what needed to be said. The drive home took me past their neighborhood. I didn't plan it, but I also didn't avoid it. As I passed Claremont Drive, I saw Chester's BMW in the driveway, the one he'd bought new last year for $48,000 while I drove my decade-old Civic. The house looked perfect from the outside, landscaping immaculate, everything precisely placed. A monument to success built on someone else's foundation. That evening, Goldie called. Her voice was thick with tears. "Daddy, please. Chester told me what happened. I know we hurt you and I'm sorry, but you can't do this. The restaurant is barely breaking even. We can't afford the mortgage on our own right now." "Then maybe you should have thought about that before deciding I wasn't close family." "That was Chester's decision. I wanted you there, but he said—" "You let him make that decision," I interrupted gently. "You chose his vision over your father. That's your right, Goldie, but it's also my right to choose how I spend my retirement money." She sobbed openly now. "So what? You're just going to let us lose the house? Everything we've worked for?" "Everything they'd worked for. Not everything I'd given them. Not everything we'd built together. Their work, their vision, their success. I'm going to let you figure it out," I said, "the way independent business owners do. You wanted to project a certain image, remember? Young, dynamic, innovative, people who don't need parents around. Dad, I love you, sweetheart, but I'm done being convenient." I ended the call and silenced my phone for the night. Outside, the ocean continued its eternal rhythm, waves breaking against the shore with patient, relentless force. I'd been patient too, for years. But every wave eventually wears down the rock. I learned about Chester's brother from the most unexpected source, my neighbor's landscaper. 2 weeks had passed since my last conversation with Goldie. The May payment deadline came and went without a word from me. The bank's second notice arrived, this time with a $300 penalty and language about serious consequences if the account wasn't brought current within 30 days. I was watering the succulents on my balcony when I heard voices from the unit below, My downstairs neighbor, an elderly widow named Mrs. Patterson, was outside directing two men with hedge trimmers. One of them, a young guy with sun-bleached hair, was talking loudly into his phone. "Yeah, man, that's rough. Your brother's really in it, huh? 15 grand is no joke." I shouldn't have eavesdropped, but I did. "Tell me about it," the other landscaper said. "Chester's always getting in over his head. Now he's borrowing from family to keep his restaurant afloat. My cousin works there, says they're bleeding money." I set down my watering can very carefully. Chester had borrowed $15,000 from someone, presumably his brother, and the restaurant was losing money. This information settled into my mind like pieces of a puzzle I hadn't known I was solving. That evening, I met Elmer at a small Italian place in Little Italy, a neighborhood we both loved for its authentic food and lack of pretension. Over plates of pasta carbonara, I filled him in on what I'd overheard. "So they're scrambling," Elmer said, twirling linguine around his fork. "Good. Means the pressure's working." The bank notice said 30 days until they can report to credit agencies. What happens then? Their score plummets, mid-500s probably. Any lender reviewing their finances will see missed mortgage payments, and that triggers automatic reviews of existing credit. If Chester has maxed out cards, and desperate people usually do, those credit companies might demand immediate payment or reduce limits, creating a cascade effect. Exactly. Elmer studied me over his wine glass. "How are you feeling about all this? Any second thoughts?" I thought about Goldie at 7, bringing me breakfast in bed on Father's Day, burnt toast and watery orange juice that I'd eaten with exaggerated enthusiasm. Thought about her at 15, when I'd caught her sneaking out, and instead of yelling, I'd stayed up all night talking about trust and safety until she cried and promised never to do it again. "I feel like I'm teaching her the same lesson I tried to teach her then," I said finally. "That actions have consequences, that trust isn't automatic. Even if it cost her the house, even then." We finished dinner, and Elmer picked up the check despite my protests. "You're going to need your money," he said with a wry smile. "Something tells me this is just getting started." He was right, though not in the way I expected. 3 days later, I was at my favorite coffee shop on Fay Avenue when I ran into Inez Delgado. The realtor spotted me immediately, her face lighting up with recognition. "Lem, how wonderful to see you." She had that enthusiastic energy that made her excellent at her job. "I've been meaning to call you. How did you like the restaurant opening? Wasn't it magnificent?" I took a sip of my Americano. "I wouldn't know. I wasn't invited." Her smile faltered, died completely. "What? But you're Goldie's father. You financed half the business. Chester told me you were flying in from—" She stopped, color rising in her cheeks. Oh no. "Flying in from where?" "He said you were out of state visiting friends, that you'd wanted to come but couldn't make it." She touched my arm, genuine distress in her eyes. "Lem, I'm so sorry. I had no idea they'd excluded you." "Not excluded," I corrected gently. "Just not close enough to make the list." Inez shook her head, anger replacing sympathy. "That's unconscionable, especially after everything you've done for them. Do you know I handled their mortgage paperwork? I saw how much you put down. 60% ownership, and they treat you like this?" Something in her tone caught my attention. "You know about the missed payments?" "Everyone in the office knows. Pacific Coast Bank uses our title company for foreclosure proceedings. When an account hits 30 days overdue, we get preliminary notices." She lowered her voice. "Between you and me, there's talk that if this goes to 60 days, the bank will move fast. That house is worth good money, and they don't like risky borrowers." I thanked her for the information, and we parted ways. But her words stayed with me. Everyone in the office knows. In the tight-knit real estate community of San Diego, reputation mattered, and Chester and Goldie's reputation was starting to crack. The real fireworks came on a Tuesday afternoon. I was reading on my balcony when my phone rang, a number I didn't recognize. "Is this Lem Arnold?" A woman's voice, professional and cool. "Speaking." "This is Patricia Chen from Pacific Coast Bank's Loan Servicing Department. I'm calling regarding account number 47829653. Our records show this account is now 31 days past due, with a balance of $6,650, including penalties." "That's correct." A pause. "Mr. Arnold, as the primary co-signer holding 60% ownership, you're legally responsible for ensuring timely payment. We need to discuss bringing this account current. I'm aware of my legal responsibilities, Ms. Chen, and I'm also aware that under California Civil Code Section 1511, I have the right to suspend performance under a contract when the other party has materially breached our agreement. Another pause, longer this time. Are you claiming Mr. Wagner has breached your mortgage agreement? I'm claiming that circumstances have materially changed, warranting a comprehensive financial review before I continue payments. My attorney has submitted a formal request for a complete audit of how my investment funds have been utilized. I see. Her tone shifted, became more careful. Mr. Arnold, I should inform you that if this account reaches 60 days past due, we'll be required to report it to all 3 credit bureaus. This will significantly impact both your credit score and Mr. Wagner's. My credit score is 782, I said calmly. I have no other debt, no loans, and I've never missed a payment in 40 years. One missed mortgage on a co-signed property won't hurt me much. But Chester Wagner, he's got credit cards, business loans, and a restaurant that's underwater. This will destroy him. Silence stretched across the line. When she spoke again, there was something almost like respect in her voice. You've thought this through. I spent 30 years as a financial consultant, Ms. Chen. I always think things through. After she hung up, I sat very still, watching sailboats drift across the bay. The dominoes were falling exactly as I'd anticipated. The bank would contact Chester. Chester would panic. And somewhere in that panic, he'd make mistakes. My phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. This is Chester's brother, Daniel. We need to talk about what you're doing to my brother's family. Call me. I deleted the text without responding. Family loyalty was admirable, but Daniel hadn't co-signed anything. His $15,000 loan to Chester just meant he'd lose money too when this whole thing collapsed. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the house on Claremont Drive, about Goldie walking through those rooms, maybe starting to understand that the walls around her were less stable than she'd believed. Part of me wanted to call her, to explain that this wasn't about punishment. It was about respect, about being seen as more than a checkbook. But I'd tried explaining for months, in gentle hints and careful conversations. They had heard what they wanted to hear and ignored the rest. Sometimes the only teacher that works is consequence. I fell asleep sometime after midnight, and I dreamed of waves. The call came at 7 in the morning, early enough that I was still in my bathrobe, watching fog roll across the ocean. Chester's name flashed on my screen like an alarm. I let it ring 4 times before answering. Good morning. The mortgage is overdue. No greeting, just raw panic. 60 days, Lem. The bank is threatening foreclosure. What the hell is wrong with you? I poured myself coffee, the phone tucked between my shoulder and ear. Nothing's wrong with me. How are things at the restaurant? Don't. He sucked in a breath, and I could practically see him pacing. This isn't a game. We got a letter from the bank yesterday. They're reporting us to the credit bureaus. Do you understand what that means? It means your credit score is about to drop like a stone in deep water. Our credit score! You're on this mortgage too. I took a sip of coffee. Perfect temperature. My score will take a minor hit. Yours will crater. There's a difference between someone with one blemish and someone juggling debt like flaming torches. Silence. Then, how did you know about your debt? Chester, I spent 3 decades helping people manage money. You think I can't spot financial desperation when I see it? I walked out to my balcony, felt the cool morning air on my face. The question you should be asking is, why would someone this desperate exclude his primary financial backer from important events? Jesus Christ, we're still on that? Fine. You want an apology? I'm sorry we didn't invite you to the opening. There, happy? Now pay the damn mortgage. Not quite how apologies work, I said mildly, but I appreciate the effort. Still doesn't solve your problem, though. What do you want from us? Interesting question. What did I want? An acknowledgement that I was more than a wallet? Proof that my daughter still remembered I'd raised her alone after her mother died? Evidence that the man she married had an ounce of gratitude in his designer-clothed body? I want you to figure it out on your own, I said, like the independent, dynamic young entrepreneurs you told your restaurant guests you were. I hung up before he could respond. My hand was steadier than it had been during our first confrontation. Practice maybe, or just certainty that I was doing the right thing. 2 hours later, Goldie called. Her voice was small, scared in a way that tugged at something deep in my chest. Daddy, please. Chester told me about the foreclosure notice. We can't lose the house. Please. Then pay the mortgage yourself. We can't. The restaurant is barely covering costs. We're at $8,000 in revenue last month against $12,000 in expenses. We used our savings to cover the gap, and now there's nothing left. I did the math automatically. $48,000 deficit over their first 3 months of operation. The restaurant was dying slowly, bleeding money from poor management and overhead that didn't match their customer base. Maybe you should reconsider some of your expenses, I suggested. That BMW Chester drives, the designer furniture, the Viking range you didn't actually need. That's not fair. Those are investments in our image, in our brand. No, sweetheart. Those are symbols of success you couldn't afford. There's a difference. I softened my voice just slightly. You wanted to build something without me, so build it. But don't ask me to fund the construction while you lock me out of the building. She started crying. The sound killed me, same as it had when she was 5 and skinned her knee, or 13 and didn't get invited to a party. Every parental instinct I had screamed to fix this, to make it better, to hand over the money and make her smile again. But that instinct had created this mess. I'd fixed things too many times, smoothed over too many problems, until she'd learned that consequences were optional if Daddy was around. I love you, I said quietly, but I'm done being convenient. Goodbye, Goldie. The week that followed was brutal in its silence. No calls, no texts, no contact. I wondered if they were scrambling for solutions, or if Chester was finally being forced to admit the depth of their financial hole to Goldie. I got my answer from an unexpected source. Elmer called on a Thursday afternoon, amusement clear in his voice. You're not going to believe this. Chester hired a lawyer. To sue me? To threaten to sue you? Different thing entirely. Some cut-rate attorney from a strip mall in El Cajon. He sent me a letter claiming you're in breach of contract for non-payment. I sat down heavily. Can they make that stick? Not even slightly. I already reviewed our documentation with a fine-tooth comb. You're completely protected under California contract law. But here's the funny part. This lawyer, he's charging them $500 for a consultation that any first-year law student could have told them was pointless. So they're throwing away money they don't have on a case they can't win. Bingo, and it gets better. The lawyer sent a copy of his letter to the bank, probably thinking it would help their case. Instead, it flagged them as litigious borrowers, which makes the bank even less likely to work with them. I couldn't help it. I laughed. Actually laughed, the sound startling in my quiet apartment. Chester's attempt at a power play had backfired spectacularly, like watching someone try to put out a fire with gasoline. What happens next? I asked. I'll file a response, get this thrown out at the preliminary hearing, maybe 2 weeks from now. The judge will probably sanction them for filing a frivolous suit. Elmer paused. Lem, they're not thinking straight anymore. They're panicking, making mistakes. This is when people get dangerous. Dangerous how? Desperate people do desperate things. Just be careful, okay? I promised I would, though I wasn't sure what danger a restaurant owner and his wife could pose beyond angry phone calls. I found out sooner than expected. That Saturday, I drove to my usual coffee shop on Fay Avenue, the one with the good pastries and the better espresso. When I walked in, the barista, a young woman named Sophie who always remembered my order, looked uncomfortable. Mr. Arnold, I need to tell you something. A guy was in here yesterday asking about you, wanted to know if you came in regularly, what time, stuff like that. My stomach tightened. What did he look like? 30s, dark hair, expensive watch. He showed me a picture of you on his phone and said he was trying to reconnect with an old friend. She bit her lip. I didn't tell him anything, but it felt weird. Thought you should know. Chester had to be. What was he planning? To confront me in public? Try to embarrass me into compliance? I thanked Sophie and left without ordering. Drove home with one eye on my rearview mirror, feeling foolish and paranoid, but unable to shake the unease. Back in my apartment, I called Elmer again, told him about the coffee shop incident. File a police report, he said immediately. Document everything. If he's following you or having you followed, that's harassment. Potentially stalking, depending on how persistent he gets. I did file a report, though the officer who took my statement seemed skeptical that anything would come of it. Family disputes, he said with a shrug. Happens all the time. Just keep documenting if it continues. That night, I stood on my balcony and looked out at the lights of the city, thinking about how quickly things had escalated. 2 months ago, I'd been the quiet father, the reliable bank, the man who said yes. Now, I was the obstacle between Chester and Goldie and their crumbling dream. And somewhere in that crumbling, I suspected they'd stopped seeing me as family entirely, just as an enemy to be dealt with. The preliminary hearing happened on a Tuesday morning in late May. I sat in the courtroom on Broadway, downtown San Diego, watching Chester and his bargain bin attorney shuffle papers at their table. Goldie wasn't with him, a detail that struck me as significant. Elmer sat beside me, perfectly calm in his tailored suit, reviewing notes he'd probably memorized days ago. Across the aisle, Chester wouldn't look at me. His jaw was set tight, and I noticed the circles under his eyes, the wrinkled collar of his shirt. He looked like a man who wasn't sleeping well. Good. Judge Patricia Morrison entered, a woman in her 50s with iron gray hair and an expression that suggested she'd seen every trick in the book twice. The proceedings were mercifully brief. Chester's attorney, a nervous man named Robert Finch, who kept adjusting his tie, started with what I assumed was his best argument. Your Honor, Mr. Wagner and his wife are facing financial hardship due to Mr. Arnold's refusal to honor his contractual obligations. As a co-signer on the mortgage, he has a legal duty to— Have you read the contract, Mr. Finch? Judge Morrison interrupted. Yes, Your Honor, but— Then you're aware of Section 7, subsection C, which explicitly allows either party to suspend payments pending review if circumstances materially change? Finch's face went from pale to red, like watching a thermometer rise in real time. That clause is overly broad, Your Honor. It could be interpreted to mean exactly what it says. She turned to Elmer. Mr. Brooks, has your client provided formal notice of his intent to review the financial arrangement? Yes, Your Honor. Filed with Pacific Coast Bank and served to Mr. Wagner on May 2nd. We've requested a complete accounting of how Mr. Arnold's initial investment of $165,000 has been utilized. And has Mr. Wagner provided that accounting? Silence. Chester shifted in his chair like a kid caught without his homework. I'll take that as a no. Judge Morrison closed the file in front of her with a decisive snap. Mr. Finch, this is a frivolous suit. Your client is in breach of his own agreement by failing to provide requested documentation. Furthermore, filing this action has wasted the court's time and Mr. Arnold's legal resources. I'm dismissing the case with prejudice and imposing sanctions of $1,200 against Mr. Wagner, payable to Mr. Arnold within 30 days. Chester's face went through several colors, red, white, then a kind of grayish green that suggested he might be sick. His attorney looked like he wanted to melt through the floor. Court is adjourned, Morrison said, already reaching for her next file. Outside the courthouse, Chester caught up to us on the steps. This isn't over. Elmer put a hand on my arm, a silent suggestion to keep walking. But I stopped, turned to face my son-in-law in the bright morning sun. You're right, I said. It's not over. You still owe me $1,200 in sanctions, plus $9,600 in missed mortgage payments, plus interest on my original investment. But who's counting? You're destroying your own daughter's life. Chester's voice rose, drawing looks from people passing by. You claim to love her, but you're taking away everything she's worked for. Everything I paid for, you mean? I kept my voice level, conversational. Tell me, Chester, when you told those people at the restaurant opening that you were self-made, did you believe it? Or did you just think I'd never find out? His hands clenched into fists. For a moment, I thought he might actually swing at me. But Elmer stepped forward, his presence enough to make Chester think better of it. Stay away from my family, Chester hissed. She's my daughter long before she was your wife, I said quietly. And when this is all over, she'll still be my daughter. But you'll just be the man who squandered her dreams and blamed everyone else for it. I walked away before he could respond. My heart was hammering, adrenaline making my hands shake. But underneath the nerves was something else. Satisfaction that I'd stood my ground without losing my composure. That was risky, Elmer said as we reached his car. Maybe. But sometimes people need to hear the truth without the polish. That afternoon, I got a call from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Mr. Arnold, this is Vanessa Kim from the San Diego Health Department. I'm calling about Golden Harvest Restaurant. You're listed as a silent partner in our business registration records. My stomach dropped. What's happened? We conducted a routine inspection yesterday and found several violations. Improper food storage, inadequate hand washing facilities, evidence of pest activity. We've issued citations totaling $800 and required them to close for 48 hours until remediation is complete. I closed my eyes. The restaurant was already hemorrhaging money. 2 days of forced closure, plus $800 in fines, plus whatever it cost to fix the violations. This could be the death blow. Thank you for informing me, I said. After she hung up, I sat very still, thinking. The health department inspection had been routine, she'd said. But in my years of consulting with restaurant owners, I knew those routine inspections often came from anonymous tips. Had someone reported Golden Harvest, one of Chester's enemies in the industry? Or maybe just a dissatisfied customer who'd found something wrong with their meal? Or, and this thought made me uncomfortable, had someone in my circle made a call? Inez knew people at the city. Had I mentioned the restaurant's struggles to her? I pushed the thought away. Even if someone had tipped off the health department, the violations were real. The restaurant had actually failed to meet standards. This wasn't sabotage. It was consequences of poor management. My phone buzzed. A text from Goldie. We have to close the restaurant for 2 days. $800 fine. This is killing us. Please, Dad. Please. I stared at the message for a long time. Imagine my daughter in that restaurant she'd dreamed about, watching health inspectors tag violations, feeling her dream crumble around her. Part of me wanted to transfer the money immediately, to make this problem disappear like I'd made so many others disappear over the years. But that was the problem, wasn't it? I'd made things too easy. Taught her that failure was optional if you had a rich enough safety net. I typed back, "I'm sorry you're going through this, but I believe you can figure it out." Her response came in seconds. "How can you be so cold?" Cold. That word stung more than I expected. But cold would be walking away entirely. Cold would be enjoying her suffering. What I felt was something else. The ache of watching someone you love learn a hard lesson you should have taught them years ago. I didn't respond to her message. Instead, I made dinner. Pasta with tomato sauce, cheap and simple, and ate while watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of amber and rose. Somewhere across the city, Chester and Goldie were dealing with their crisis. Fighting, probably. Blaming me, certainly. Maybe blaming each other. I remembered a conversation I'd had with Sarah years ago, when Goldie was 12 and wanted an expensive pair of shoes we couldn't afford. "If we give her everything," Sarah had said, "she'll never learn the value of anything." I'd agreed with her then, but after Sarah died, I'd given Goldie everything anyway, trying to compensate for the mother she'd lost with material comfort. And now, 17 years later, I was finally learning the lesson my wife had tried to teach me. That love without boundaries wasn't love at all. It was just enabling dressed up in affection. June arrived with the kind of heat that made San Diego feel less like paradise and more like a test of endurance. I was watering my balcony plants when Elmer called with news that made the temperature feel even hotter. The bank reported them to all 3 credit bureaus, he said without preamble. Chester's score dropped to 542. Goldie's is at 558. I set down the watering can. What does that mean practically? It means every creditor they have is going to review their accounts, credit cards, business loans, everything. Some will reduce limits, others will demand immediate payment on overdue balances. He paused. Lem, this is going to get ugly fast. He was right. 3 days later, I learned just how ugly from an unexpected encounter at the Whole Foods on Girard Avenue. I was comparing prices on coffee beans when I heard a familiar voice from the next aisle. "Told you we should have gone to Costco. This place is too expensive." Goldie. I froze, my hand still on a bag of French roast. "We need to maintain appearances," Chester replied, his voice strained. "People see us shopping at discount stores. They'll think the restaurant is failing." "The restaurant is failing, Chester. We lost $11,000 last month." I moved quietly toward the end of the aisle, staying out of sight but close enough to hear. Wrong? Probably, but I was past caring about propriety. It's just a rough patch. Once we get past these violations and reopen, with what money? MasterCard cut our limit to $5,000. Discover closed our account entirely. Your brother wants his $15,000 back, and we can't even pay next week's payroll. A long silence. Then Chester, quieter. We'll sell some things. The furniture, maybe. My car. Your precious BMW? Goldie's laugh was bitter. The one you just had to have? The one that cost $700 a month? Don't start with that again. Why not? You started this whole mess, telling me we didn't need my father at the opening, that we had to look independent. Look where that got us. I heard something that might have been a shopping cart slamming against a shelf. Your father is a vindictive old man who can't stand seeing us succeed without him. Succeed? Goldie's voice cracked. We're drowning, Chester, and maybe he had a point. Maybe we should have included him. Maybe we should have treated him with some basic respect instead of what? He gave us money. That doesn't buy him a seat at every table for the rest of our lives. I stepped around the corner then, unable to help myself. They were standing by the organic produce, Chester gripping the shopping cart handle like it was the only thing keeping him upright. Goldie with tears streaking her mascara. They saw me at the same moment. The color drained from Goldie's face. Chester's jaw went rigid. Hello, I said simply. Dad. Goldie's voice was small. I heard. I looked at the sparse items in their cart. Generic pasta, the cheapest vegetables, nothing like the expensive ingredients I knew the restaurant required. Having trouble? Chester stepped forward, positioning himself between Goldie and me like I was a threat. We don't need your commentary. Apparently, you don't need much of anything from me. Just $400,000 over 5 years, a house down payment, a business loan, and ongoing mortgage payments. I kept my voice pleasant, conversational. But who's counting? You are, Chester spat. Every single dollar, like some kind of loan shark keeping score. No, like a father who expected basic gratitude and got excluded from his daughter's proudest moment. I turned to Goldie. Tell me something. When you were planning that opening, when Chester said we should keep it intimate, did you think about me at all? She opened her mouth, closed it. Tears spilled over. That's what I thought. I picked up my coffee, the expensive organic blend I could afford because I lived modestly everywhere else, and walked past them. Good luck with the payroll. I made it to my car before my hands started shaking. Sat in the parking lot for 10 minutes, breathing deeply, wondering if I'd just crossed a line from justice into cruelty. But then I remembered the words I'd overheard. Your father is a vindictive old man. Not, maybe we were wrong. Not, we should apologize. Just blame shifted conveniently away from themselves. That evening, Inez called. Lem, I thought you should know. There's talk in the restaurant community about Golden Harvest. What kind of talk? The bad kind. Someone posted on the North Park Business Association Facebook group about late payments to suppliers. Then someone else mentioned the health violations. People are putting pieces together, realizing the place is in trouble. I closed my eyes. How bad? 2 of their vendors called my office asking if there's going to be a foreclosure on the property because they want to know if they should pull their credit lines. Word is spreading that Chester and Goldie are high-risk clients. The restaurant industry in San Diego was a tight community. Once reputation started to crumble, it happened fast. Suppliers talked to each other, shared information about who paid on time and who didn't. A restaurant with a reputation for financial instability was a restaurant that suppliers would abandon at the first sign of trouble. Thanks for letting me know, I said. Lem? Inez hesitated. Are you okay with how this is going? I'm teaching them a lesson that's 20 years overdue. Whether I'm okay with it or not doesn't really matter. After we hung up, I poured myself a whiskey, a rare indulgence, and stood on my balcony watching the sun set over the Pacific. The water turned gold, then amber, then deepening shades of purple as night crept in from the east. My phone buzzed, an email from Pacific Coast Bank, formal and impersonal. Notice of intent to foreclose on property, located at 4738 Claremont Drive, San Diego, CA 92117. They had 30 days to bring the account current or face foreclosure proceedings. The bank was done playing games. I forwarded the email to Elmer, then sat with my whiskey and did the math. 3 months of missed payments, $9,600. Late fees and penalties, $900. Court sanctions, $1,200. Total amount Chester and Goldie would need to find in 30 days, $11,700. On top of their restaurant losses, supplier debts, and operating costs. It was impossible. They'd never make it. My phone rang. Goldie. I stared at her name on the screen, wavering between answering and letting it go to voicemail. I answered. Dad? She was crying so hard I could barely understand her. Dad, please. We got the foreclosure notice. 30 days. We'll lose everything. Please, I'm begging you. I'll do anything. Just please help us. Anything. The word hung in the air between us like smoke. What about Chester? I asked quietly. He won't call you. His pride won't let him. But I'm calling. I'm asking. I was wrong, Dad. We were wrong. We should have invited you. We should have treated you better. I see that now. Do you see it? Or do you just see a way out of your problem? She sobbed harder. How can you ask me that? I'm your daughter. Yes, I said. You are. And I've loved you every day of your life. Loved you enough to give you everything I had. But love isn't a transaction, Goldie. It's not something you can withdraw from only when your account is empty. I know that. I know I've been terrible, and I'm sorry, and I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you if I just give you money. Silence. Then, quietly. Yes. At least she was honest. I'll think about it, I said. But Goldie, the next time we talk, I want to hear from both of you, together. And I want the truth about your finances, your marriage, and why you really excluded me from that opening. We will, I promise. 30 days, I said, echoing the bank's notice. That's how long you have to figure out if you want my help or if you just want my money. I hung up before she could respond. Outside, the city glittered with lights, thousands of people living their lives, most of them oblivious to the small drama playing out in a restaurant on University Avenue and a house on Claremont Drive. 30 days until foreclosure, 30 days until everything came crashing down. Unless they were willing to do the one thing they'd avoided since this whole mess started, tell me the truth. They didn't call for 11 days. 11 days of silence that felt louder than any argument. I went about my life, morning walks, afternoon reading, evenings watching the ocean, but underneath the routine, I was waiting. On day 12, I got a different kind of call, a young woman's voice, professional but uncertain. Mr. Arnold, this is Jessica from Golden Harvest. I'm the assistant manager. I'm calling because, well, we haven't been paid in 3 weeks, and Chester isn't returning my messages. I sat down slowly. I'm not involved in the restaurant's operations. I know, but you're listed as a partner in the business registration, and I didn't know who else to call. 3 of us walked out today. We can't work for free. Her voice cracked slightly. I have bills to pay, and Chester keeps saying it'll be fine. But the supplier stopped delivering, and yesterday someone from the IRS came asking about unpaid payroll taxes. The IRS. That was a new level of trouble. Payroll taxes weren't like other debts. You couldn't negotiate them away or discharge them in bankruptcy. They followed you like shadows. How much is owed in payroll? I asked. About $18,000 total for all of us over the last month and a half. After she hung up, I sat with that number. $18,000 in unpaid wages, plus the mortgage arrears, the court sanctions, the supplier debts, the health violations. The restaurant wasn't just failing, it was imploding, taking Chester and Goldie's reputation down with it. Part of me felt vindicated. They'd made their choices, built their tower of arrogance and entitlement, and now they were watching it collapse. But another part, the part that remembered teaching Goldie to ride a bike, helping her with algebra homework, walking her down the aisle at her wedding, that part ached. 2 days later, they came to my apartment, together, finally. I saw them through my peephole, Goldie with red-rimmed eyes, Chester looking like he'd aged 5 years and 5 months. He'd lost weight, his expensive clothes hanging loose on his frame. I opened the door. Come in. They sat on my modest couch, perched on the edge like birds ready to flee. My apartment, with its second-hand furniture and simple decor, must have looked pathetic compared to their house with its marble and leather. But unlike their house, mine was paid for. You wanted the truth, Goldie said finally. So here it is. Chester stared at his hands. Didn't interrupt. That alone told me how desperate things had gotten. The restaurant opening, Goldie continued, her voice steady despite the tears. Chester convinced me that having you there would make us look dependent. He said investors and food critics would see an old man backing us and assume we weren't serious entrepreneurs. I never said old man, Chester muttered. You said retiree. Same thing? Goldie turned back to me. I went along with it because I wanted to believe we could do this on our own, that we were as talented and capable as Chester kept saying we were. But mostly I went along with it because it was easier than fighting with him. And the lies afterward? I asked, telling Inez I was out of state. Chester finally looked up. That was me, all me. I didn't want people asking questions, didn't want anyone thinking we'd cut you out. Bad optics. Bad optics, I repeated. Your father-in-law wasn't worth inviting, but the appearance of having excluded him was worth lying about. His jaw tightened, but he nodded. Yes, it was arrogant and stupid, and I'm sorry. Are you sorry you did it, or sorry it backfired? Silence. Then Chester did something I hadn't expected. He laughed, a bitter, broken sound. Both? I don't even know anymore. Everything I've touched since March has turned to ash. The restaurant, our credit, our marriage. He glanced at Goldie. We fought for 3 hours last night about whether to come here. She wanted to. I wanted to sell everything we owned first, prove we could handle this without you. And what changed your mind? We ran out of things to sell. The BMW's gone, sold for $32,000, which sounds like a lot until you realize we owed $38,000 on it. The furniture netted us $8,000. We're sleeping on an air mattress now. He ran a hand through his hair. Yesterday, my brother served me with a lawsuit for the $15,000 I borrowed. So, yeah, I guess what changed my mind was hitting absolute rock bottom and realizing there's no way up without help. I looked at Goldie. And you? What do you want from this conversation? I want my dad back, she whispered. I want to stop lying to myself that we didn't need you, that we could do this alone. I want... Her voice broke. I want to be 7 years old again, when the worst thing in my life was a failed math test and you stayed up all night helping me study. The memory hit me like a physical thing. That night, teaching her multiplication tables with candy pieces, watching her face light up when she finally understood. Back when I could fix her problems with patience and presence. I can't make you 7 again, I said quietly, and I can't fix this mess by just throwing money at it. That's what got us here in the first place. Then what do you want? Chester asked, and for the first time he sounded genuinely curious rather than defensive. I want you to understand something. I leaned forward. For 5 years, you've treated me like a resource to be extracted, a convenient bank that didn't charge interest and never said no. You took $400,000 from me and couldn't spare one invitation to the event that money made possible. That's not forgetfulness. That's not bad planning. That's contempt dressed up as independence. Goldie flinched like I'd slapped her. Chester went very still. But here's the thing, I continued. I don't want you to lose everything. I don't want my daughter sleeping on an air mattress or dodging IRS agents. What I want is for you to actually see me, not as a wallet, not as a safety net, but as a person who deserves basic respect and inclusion. We do see you, Goldie said. I swear, Dad, we do now. Maybe, or maybe you see that you need me, which isn't the same thing. I stood, walked to my window overlooking the ocean. I'm going to make you an offer, one time only. Take it or leave it. They waited, barely breathing. I'll pay off the mortgage arrears, $11,700, plus I'll cover the next 3 months of payments to get you stable with the bank. That's $27,300 total. Hope flared in Goldie's eyes. Chester leaned forward. But, I said, and watched that hope flicker, there are conditions. First, you sell the restaurant, immediately. Take whatever you can get, use it to pay off your suppliers and employees. No more pretending you can make it work. Dad, the restaurant is my dream. Your dream is a nightmare that's drowning you. Sell it, learn from it, and maybe try again in a few years when you're actually ready. I held up a second finger. Second, Chester pays back his brother in full, even if it takes him years. Family debts are the worst kind, and I won't enable you to burn that bridge. Chester nodded slowly. Okay. Third, you both get financial counseling, real counseling, from a professional who will teach you how to budget and plan and live within your means, and you show me the receipts proving you went. Done, Goldie said. And fourth, this is the big one. You both write me a letter, not an email, not a text. An actual handwritten letter explaining what you learned from this experience and how you plan to do better. You have 30 days. They looked at each other, then back at me. That's it? Chester asked. That's all you want? No, I said. I also want my Sundays back. Once a month, we have dinner together, just the 3 of us. No phones, no drama, just Family time where you actually talk to me like I matter. Goldie started crying again, but this time with something that looked like relief. Yes. Absolutely yes. Chester stood, extended his hand. Thank you. I don't deserve this, but thank you. I shook his hand. His grip was firmer than I expected, his palm calloused from restaurant work. You're right. You don't deserve it, but Goldie does. And more importantly, I deserve to have my family back. After they left, I stood on my balcony and watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of forgiveness. I transferred the money the next morning, $27,300 wired directly to Pacific Coast Bank with a memo line that read, Final mortgage assistance for account number 47829653. The word final felt important, a line in the sand. Elmer called an hour later. You did it? I did it. How do you feel? I thought about that. Like I just paid for an expensive lesson, hopefully one they'll actually learn. And if they don't, if they blow this chance, then at least I'll know I tried. That's more than they gave me. The first test came faster than I expected. 3 days after our conversation, I drove past Golden Harvest on my way to the grocery store. A large "For Sale" sign hung in the window, along with a handwritten note. Thank you to our loyal customers. New ownership coming soon. I pulled over, stared at that sign for a long moment. They'd actually done it, listed the restaurant, admitted defeat, chosen survival over pride. It was a small thing, but it mattered. The second test arrived by mail a week later. 2 letters, one in Goldie's looping handwriting, one in Chester's angular script. I made coffee, sat on my balcony, and opened Goldie's first. Dear Dad, it began. No daddy, no diminutive. Just the simple acknowledgement of our relationship. I've spent the last week trying to figure out what to write. How do you summarize 5 years of taking someone for granted in a single letter? How do you explain that you stopped seeing your father as a person and started seeing him as a solution? The truth is, I can't fully explain it. I can only tell you what I've learned. I learned that dreams built on other people's sacrifices aren't really yours. That success you didn't earn is just borrowed time. That the people who love you most are the easiest to hurt because you know they'll keep loving you anyway. Mom used to say you were the strongest person she knew, not because you were tough, but because you were steady, like a lighthouse, she said. Always there, always reliable, never asking for credit. I took advantage of that steadiness. I mistook your generosity for obligation, your love for a resource I could mine whenever I needed it. The restaurant failed because Chester and I didn't know what we were doing. We had passion but no planning, dreams but no discipline. Every time something went wrong, we threw money at it. Your money, instead of learning to problem solve. And when that ran out, we blamed everyone except ourselves. Losing the restaurant hurts, but losing your respect hurt more. I'm 28 years old, Dad. It's time I grew up and learned what you've been trying to teach me all along. That love is a verb, not a noun. It's what you do, not what you expect to receive. I promise to do better. To be better, to earn back the daughter you deserve. Love, Goldie. I had to set the letter down, wipe my eyes, take a few deep breaths before I could continue. Chester's letter was shorter, less polished, but somehow more honest for it. Lem, I won't insult you with excuses. I was arrogant. I thought I knew better than a man who'd spent 3 decades managing wealth because I'd spent 3 years managing a Wendy's. That's not just stupid, it's offensive. I convinced Goldie to exclude you from the opening because I was intimidated by you. There, I said it. You're everything I'm not. Financially stable, emotionally mature, respected in your community. Having you there would have reminded everyone, including me, that I didn't build this restaurant. You did. And I couldn't handle that truth. My pride cost us everything. The restaurant, our savings, our reputation. Almost cost me my marriage too. Goldie and I are in counseling now. Not just financial, but marital. Turns out when you build a life on lies and borrowed money, the foundation cracks pretty fast. I'm working 2 jobs now, managing a Panera during the day, bartending at night. It's humbling, but humility is probably what I needed most. That, and to learn that being a man isn't about pretending you don't need help. It's about being honest about when you do. Thank you for the second chance. I'll spend the rest of my life proving I deserved it. Chester. I sat with those letters for a long time, reading them over and over. They weren't perfect, but they were real, raw, honest in a way our previous conversations had never been. That afternoon, I called them. "I got your letters." "And," Goldie's voice was tentative, "and I think we should have that Sunday dinner soon, this weekend if you're free." The sound she made was half laugh, half sob. "We're free. We're very, very free." Sunday came with clear skies and warm breezes. I made reservations at a modest Italian restaurant in Little Italy. Nothing fancy, just good food and honest prices. When Goldie and Chester arrived, they looked different somehow. Lighter, maybe, despite everything they'd lost. We ordered pasta and house wine, talked about small things at first, the weather, a movie Goldie had watched, Chester's new jobs. Then, gradually, bigger things, their counseling sessions, the buyer who'd offered $90,000 for the restaurant equipment and lease, their plans to rent a small apartment in Normal Heights, something they could actually afford. "We're starting over," Goldie said, twirling linguine on her fork. "It's scary, but also kind of exciting, like we get to rebuild, but this time with actual foundations." "Foundations matter," I said, "in buildings and in life." Chester reached across the table, squeezed Goldie's hand. "Your dad's been telling me about some entry-level positions at financial firms. Nothing glamorous, but it's a foot in the door. A chance to actually learn the business side of things, instead of just pretending I understand it." "You recommended him?" Goldie looked at me, surprised. "I made some calls," I admitted. "Old colleagues who owed me favors. No guarantees, but Chester has management experience and he's willing to start at the bottom. That counts for something." The dinner lasted 3 hours. We talked about everything. Their mistakes, my hurt, what we all could have done differently. It wasn't comfortable, but it was honest. And honesty, I was learning, was more valuable than comfort. As we were leaving, Goldie hugged me tight. "Thank you for not giving up on us." "I'm your father," I said simply. "That's not something you give up on, but it is something you have to protect, even from the people you love most." Driving home along the coast, windows down, salt air rushing in, I thought about the last 6 months, the pain, the anger, the carefully calculated revenge that had brought them to their knees. Had it been worth it? Yes. Because the alternative was watching my daughter turn into someone I didn't recognize, married to a man who saw me as an ATM, living a lie funded by my silence. Better the hard truth that set us free than the comfortable lie that would have poisoned us slowly. My phone buzzed at a red light, a text from Goldie. "Chester just told me you're covering 3 months of mortgage payments, not just catching up the arrears." "Dad, that's an extra $9,600. You didn't have to do that." I typed back with one hand. "I know, but sometimes we do things not because we have to, but because we can, and because we choose to believe in second chances." Her response came immediately. "I love you, and I promise you won't regret this." I hoped she was right, but even if she wasn't, even if they stumbled again, at least this time they'd be stumbling forward with their eyes open, not backward while pretending everything was fine. The ocean stretched out beside me, endless and patient, its waves still breaking against the shore in that eternal rhythm, teaching the same lesson they had always taught, that persistence matters, that consequences are real, but that forgiveness, true forgiveness, was possible for those willing to do the work. I drove home to my small apartment, to my secondhand furniture and my ocean view, and I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. September arrived with the kind of perfect weather that reminded me why people paid premium prices to live in San Diego. I was on my balcony reading the newspaper over coffee when my phone rang. "Elmer, the restaurant sold," he said. "Final papers signed yesterday. $92,000 for the equipment and lease transfer." I did the math automatically. After paying off suppliers, employees, and outstanding debts, Goldie and Chester would walk away with maybe $15,000. Not much to show for a year of work and a $120,000 investment, but at least they'd walk away clean. How are they handling it? Better than expected. Chester's already been hired at Merrill Lynch, entry level, but it's a real job with benefits. Goldie's taking online business courses, talking about maybe teaching culinary arts instead of running a restaurant. Learning from failure instead of repeating it. Maybe there was hope after all. The Sunday dinners had continued through August and into September. Each one slightly easier, slightly more genuine. We'd established rules, no talk of money unless absolutely necessary, no rehashing old grievances, just present tense conversations about current life. At the last dinner, Chester had shown me his first paycheck stub from Merrill Lynch. $32,000 a year, he'd said with a self-deprecating laugh. Not exactly the six-figure salary I was aiming for. Everyone starts somewhere, I'd replied. The question is where you end up, not where you begin. Goldie had surprised me by bringing a small gift, a framed photo of the three of us from her wedding day, before everything had gone sideways. I found this while packing for the move, she'd said. Look at your face, Dad. You were so happy for me. I'd been happy, blind maybe, to the warning signs of Chester's fiscal irresponsibility, but happy. Now it was the final Sunday of September, and we'd agreed to meet at my apartment instead of a restaurant. Goldie wanted to cook for me, a gesture that felt symbolic somehow, like reclaiming a skill she'd turned into a failed business and reframing it as an act of love. They arrived at 3, loaded down with grocery bags. I'd offered to reimburse them, but Chester had waved me off. We can afford pasta and vegetables, Lem. We're broke, not destitute. The difference in his tone was remarkable. No defensiveness, no pride masquerading as independence. Just honest acknowledgement of their situation. While Goldie cooked, Chester and I sat on the balcony, watching sailboats drift across the bay. He'd lost the expensive watch, the designer clothes, the polished veneer of success. In its place was something more genuine, a man learning to be comfortable with being ordinary. I need to tell you something, he said, not looking at me. About the opening. We've moved past that, Chester. No, I need to say this, for me. He gripped the balcony railing. It wasn't just about image or independence. I was jealous of you. I turned to face him. Jealous? Goldie talked about you constantly when we first started dating. My dad would know how to fix this, or my dad always says. Every time we had a problem, you were the solution she wanted, and I hated it because it reminded me that I'd never be the man you are. He finally looked at me. Excluding you from the opening was my way of proving I didn't need you, that I could give Goldie something you couldn't. You did give her something I couldn't, I said quietly. You gave her a partner, someone to build a life with. I'm her father, Chester. We were never in competition. I know that now. Took losing everything to figure it out, but I know it. Goldie called us in for dinner. She'd made carbonara, simple, classic, the kind of dish that required technique more than expensive ingredients. It was perfect. Mom's recipe, she said as I took my first bite. You taught it to me when I was 16, remember? Said it was important to know how to make something delicious with just eggs, pasta, and bacon. I remembered. That had been a hard year, money tight after Sarah's medical bills. We'd eaten a lot of pasta. It's perfect, I said, and meant it. After dinner, we sat in my small living room, the three of us crammed onto my second-hand couch. It should have felt crowded, but instead, it felt right. Dad, Goldie said, her voice serious. We need to talk about the money you gave us, the $27,000. It's done, forgotten. No, it's not forgotten. We want to pay you back. I started to protest, but Chester held up a hand. Hear us out. We know it'll take years, maybe a decade, but we're setting aside $200 a month. That's what we can afford right now, without going into more debt. At that rate, we'll have it paid back in, 11 years? 11 years and 4 months, I said automatically, the old financial consultant in me unable to resist the calculation. Right. So, when I'm 49 and Goldie's 39, we'll throw you a party to celebrate paying off our debt. And you'll be, 74? Assuming I'm still around to collect. You'll be around, Goldie said fiercely. You're too stubborn to go anywhere. I looked at them, young, broke, humbled, but somehow more real than they had been 6 months ago, when they'd had a restaurant and a dream and nothing but contempt for the man who'd made it possible. Keep your money, I said. Invest it in your future, your real future, not the fantasy version you were chasing. Dad, I'm serious. You want to pay me back? Do it by building a life you can actually afford, by treating each other with respect, by remembering that the people who love you aren't resources to be exploited. I leaned back, felt the worn cushion beneath me, the cushion I'd owned for 15 years because it was perfectly functional and didn't need replacing. That's worth more than $27,000. Goldie wiped her eyes. How did you get so wise? Practice and pain. Lots of pain. I smiled. Mostly yours lately. Chester laughed, a real laugh, the first I'd heard from him in months. You've earned the right to gloat. I'm not gloating. I'm just acknowledging that sometimes the only way to learn is by falling hard enough that you can't pretend you're still standing. They left around 8, with promises to call during the week, to keep attending their counseling, to remember that Sunday dinners were non-negotiable. I watched them drive away in Chester's used Toyota, a far cry from the BMW, but paid for in cash. Alone in my apartment, I poured myself a small whiskey and stood on my balcony watching the city lights flicker on as darkness settled over the bay. Somewhere out there, Chester and Goldie were driving to their modest apartment in Normal Heights, probably already arguing about something trivial. That's what couples did. But underneath the argument would be something they'd lacked before, a foundation of honesty. My phone buzzed, a text from Goldie. "Thank you for teaching us what we should have learned years ago. That love isn't a transaction. That respect isn't optional. That family means showing up, not just when you need something, but especially when you don't. We love you, Dad, and we see you. Finally, we really see you." I stared at that message for a long time, thought about the journey that had brought us here, the betrayal, the anger, the carefully calculated revenge that had dismantled their lives piece by piece. Had it been worth it? The question wasn't whether they had deserved it. They had. The question was whether it had accomplished what I'd hoped. And looking at that text, at the self-awareness and gratitude it represented, I had my answer. Yes. Not because revenge was sweet. It wasn't. Watching my daughter struggle had been agony, even when she'd earned that struggle. But because sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to enable someone's self-destruction, even when enabling would be easier, I'd taught them about consequences, about respect, about the difference between generosity and servitude. More importantly, I'd taught myself that being a good father sometimes meant being a hard father, that boundaries weren't cruelty, that love strong enough to say no was stronger than love that always said yes. I raised my glass to the ocean, to the waves that never stopped teaching their lessons about persistence and patience. To second chances, I said to the night, and to being close enough to earn them. The city glittered below, full of people learning their own lessons, fighting their own battles, building their own futures. Somewhere in Normal Heights, my daughter and son-in-law were doing the same. And for the first time in years, I wasn't carrying their weight. I was just their lighthouse, steady, reliable, always there when they needed guidance, but expecting them to do the sailing themselves. That felt right. That felt like peace. That felt like victory. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.